Hey guys, in today's movie recap, we're going to travel back in time to save the future. Enjoy! In 2044, the United States has suffered economic collapse, causing severe social decay and growth in organized crime. In addition, a strange mutation has occurred in 10% of the population, giving them minor telekinetic powers, manifested by their ability to float small objects. They are referred to as TKs. 30 years into the future, time travel will have been invented, but is immediately outlawed. However, due to advanced tracking technology, crime bosses turn to time travel to send their targets to the past, the movie's present, to be killed by loopers. The victims have bags over their heads and silver bars strapped to their backs. This cozy job, however, comes at a price. The severe sanctions on time travel mean that crime bosses eventually need to end a looper's contract, and also eliminate any traces of their working relationship. So, they send their older version back to the past to be killed by their younger self, referred to as closing the loop, which each looper must do themselves. They're paid a handsome sum in gold for this. Joe Simmons works for a mafia company in Kansas City as a looper. Joe's boss, Abe, was sent back in time to manage the loopers and also owns a club that Joe frequents. He spends time getting jazzed up with his girlfriend, Susie, a showgirl. Abe also controls the Gatmen, his muscle. Gatmen are so named for their Magnum revolvers, which has greater range and accuracy than a looper's blunderbuss shotgun.
My kid, cut it out and blow your other foot off.
While at the club one evening, another looper announces that he has just closed his loop. The big payoff in gold is reason to party. As Joe continues his work, him and the other loopers begin to notice that loops are being closed at an increasing rate. One night, Seth, Joe's friend and a fellow looper, visits him in a panic, telling him that he was supposed to close his own loop, but couldn't do it. Seth shares that his victim appeared, singing a song his mother had sung to him when he was a baby. Knowing it was his future self, he couldn't kill him. Old Seth tells young Seth about a new crime boss called the Rainmaker, who has commenced a reign of terror in the future. The Gatmen then knock on Joe's door, so he hides Seth in his apartment floor safe. The Gatmen suspect Joe is shielding Seth, so they take him to Abe. Abe makes a deal with Joe. If he gives up Seth, he'll walk free. If he doesn't, they'll take the silver he's been hoarding for his retirement in France. Joe reluctantly gives up Seth. Abe suggests Joe go to China instead of France.
I'm from the future. You should go to China.
I'm going to France.
You're going.
Afterwards, we see old Seth attempting to climb a barbed wire fence when he notices old scars appearing on his arm, telling him to be at an address. He ignores this, and then one of his fingers disappears. Shortly after, another finger is gone. Horrifyingly, the tip of his nose is next on the chopping block. Old Seth returns to his car and heads for the address he was given, losing a few more limbs along the way before crawling up to a door. He bangs on a door and a gun sticks out, immediately shooting him and putting him out of his misery. Behind the shooter, we can see young Seth being operated on while still alive. Joe continues his duties and after each job visits a diner where he practices his French with one of the waitresses named Beatrix. While waiting to do one job, he is puzzled when the victim is past schedule. When the person does appear, he has no bag over his head. Joe recognizes old Joe as his older self and tries to shoot him. Old Joe spins around and uses the gold on his back to deflect the bullet. He grabs a gold bar and throws it at Joe, then knocks him out with a thudding punch. Joe comes to and finds a note, telling him to hop on a train and get out of town. Instead, Joe returns to his apartment where he finds the Gatmen searching for him and taking his hard-earned silver. He charges one of the Gatmen, known as Kid Blue, and manages to trap him in the floor safe. Joe shouts to him that he's going to close his loop, but is forced to flee once more, falling from his fire escape and blacking out. We're treated to flashbacks from old Joe's perspective. Joe closes his loop and moves to Shanghai per Abe's advice. We step quickly through the next 30 years and see Joe has a good retirement. However, his continued drug use eats through his funds rather quickly, and he must continue working with local crime gangs to make ends meet, until he meets a beautiful, caring woman who helps him turn his life around. He marries her and settles down. Life is good until the Gatmen come looking for him. They bag him up, tie him up, and prepare to send him back to the past. Though, he manages to slip the restraints, get his hood off, and subdue his attackers. Attaboy. He then jumps into the time machine. We see the previous events unfold and watch old Joe escape in Joe's truck. We watch as his memories begin to alter to reflect young Joe's actions. Instead of fleeing, he returned back to his apartment. Old Joe comes through his backup and takes care of the foes before rescuing young Joe. He drops him off by a train and disappears once more. We see him looking up some cryptic numbers at the library, which turn up 3 pictures of babies and their current whereabouts. Then, letters begin to form on his hand and arm. Old Joe finds himself at a diner. Turns out, the message spelled Beatrix, which is the name of the waitress that Joe practices French with. Old Joe asks young Joe how his French lessons are going, then says in French, When young Joe doesn't understand, old Joe says,
No, you'll get it eventually.
Obviously.
Old Joe tells him more about the Rainmaker. He appeared out of nowhere and single-handedly took control of all the major crime syndicates within 6 months. He's responsible for mass executions and vagrant purgings, and he ordered the closing of all loops. Old Joe opens up about his wife and how she's going to save young Joe's corrupt life. Though, all her good deeds are ultimately rewarded by a bullet when the Gatmen accidentally gun her down during Joe's capture. Shortly before this, Joe received a call and was given the Rainmaker's birth records. Old Joe knows that in the present, the child who will grow up to become the Rainmaker is living in the same county. If he can kill the Rainmaker, then he'll never be captured and his wife would still be alive. All that is known about the Rainmaker is that he has a synthetic jaw and wants his mother get murdered. Young Joe doesn't care about Old Joe or his wife and just wants to live out his own destiny. Old Joe manages to apprehend him just before he attempts to shoot him. Suddenly, Gatmen burst in. Young Joe runs off and snags a piece of the map. Him and the Gatmen shoot at Old Joe as he runs off. Then, the Gatmen start shooting at Young Joe, who also runs off. For his failures, Kid Blue is relieved of his duties and gets a smack on the wrist. Young Joe follows the coordinates to a farmhouse owned by Sarah, who lives with their son, Sid. He's initially shooed off the property by a gun-toting Sarah, but after he saves her from this guy, she takes him in and helps him sober up. When Joe shows Sarah the map to confirm the location, she recognizes the digits and blasts Joe in the chest.
Hey.
Fortunately, the gun was loaded with rock salt. Joe explains the situation, well, except for the fact that the bad guy is his older self. It turns out Sarah knows a thing or two about loopers, and then she tells him that the numbers are Sid's birthday and hospital number. They agree to work together to stop the old man. Back to Old Joe, we see he's tracked down one of the potential Rainmaker children. Naturally, he kills him, but when he realizes he's still existing in the present, he breaks down crying. He has killed the wrong child. He then heads to another child's place, but hesitates when he realizes it's his old girlfriend's child. Instead of killing the child right away, he watches their apartment. Meanwhile at the farm, Sarah tells Sid to stay away from Joe, but Sid is curious. He befriends Joe and shows him some of his toys. Specifically, one that he beefs up with a bigger battery to act as a transmitter for when the bad guys come by. Joe is very impressed by his smarts. As young Joe and Sarah become close, he learns that she is a telekinetic with slightly more power than other TKs, and that Sid was raised by Sarah's sister for 2 years until she was somehow killed. Sid thinks Sarah's sister is his real mother. We witness a terrifying scene where Sid becomes enraged at Sarah, accusing her of being a liar. She runs off and hides in a safe until Sid calms down. Afterwards, she comforts him and he apologizes. The next day, one of the Gatmen, Jess, comes looking for Joe. Sarah realizes that they look awfully similar. Sid helps him escape and Jess leaves. While Sid and Joe are alone hiding, Joe tells him how his own mother sold him for drugs. We see how being motherless led Joe to a life of crime. The next morning, a suspicious Jess returns and holds Sarah at gunpoint before Joe comes down the stairs. As Joe tries to reason with Jess, Sid starts to come down the stairs. Startled by Jess, Sid falls down the stairs and goes into a rage. He lets out a massive telekinetic blast, killing Jess. His blood rains out of his chest. Sid's extraordinary telekinetic abilities confirm to Joe that he is indeed the Rainmaker. He heads into the fields looking for him, but what he finds is just a confused and sad little boy. He comforts him, realizing that all this boy needs is love to set him on the right path. Joe tells Sarah and Sid to flee, surmising that his employers and Old Joe will soon arrive. Meanwhile, in an effort to win over Abe, Kid Blue has tracked Old Joe to Susie's apartment and captures him when he breaks inside to kill the child. Prior to Joe's capture, Abe has been putting together a small army to invade the farm. To his pleasant surprise, Kid Blue pulls up to the compound with Old Joe in hand. All is well and good until... Yep, Old Joe manages to break free and goes on an absolute guns-blazing rampage, killing everyone in sight, including Abe. Though, Kid Blue survives and spots the map before heading out to take his revenge. The two Joes confront each other near the farm. Old Joe offers young Joe the truck full of gold, which he looted from Abe's headquarters, but he refuses. Suddenly, Kid Blue appears, blindsiding young Joe. Things look dire before Joe outsmarts Kid Blue and finally puts an end to his shenanigans. Amidst the chaos, Old Joe has fled in search of Sarah and Sid. The pair are attempting to drive away when Old Joe starts shooting at their truck. Sid wants Sarah to stop the truck, but instead, she steps on the gas, hoping to run him over. Sid gets scared and accidentally flips the truck over with his TK powers. They manage to get out of the truck and flee to the sugarcane field to hide, but Old Joe fires at Sid, grazing his cheek. Sid goes into another rage and uses his blast of TK powers to suspend Sarah and Old Joe in the air. Meanwhile, young Joe's in hot pursuit when he gets blown away by the blast. Sarah manages to calm Sid down, telling him that she loves him and that everything's gonna be okay. Sarah hugs him, and he calls her mom for the first time. Old Joe recovers and grabs his gun, ready to shoot Sid. Sarah tells Sid to run and gets in front, acting as a shield. As young Joe looks on, he suddenly has an epiphany. He sees the path of anger and desperation that old Joe is about to put Sid on. He realizes that by shooting Sarah and wounding Sid, old Joe creates the very thing he's trying to destroy. In order to end this cycle of pain, young Joe turns his gun on himself. Within moments, old Joe disappears. Sarah lovingly puts Sid to bed after bandaging up the wound on his cheek. She then goes back out to the field and notices that the ground around the overturned truck is strewn with gold bars. Hell yeah. She walks over to young Joe's body and takes a moment to stroke his hair. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. I can see that the community is growing a ton now, and that's all thanks to you guys leaving comments and likes and generally supporting the channel. And it also really keeps me motivated. This is the 4th video of this week, which is a record for me. So thanks again, guys.